Good day everyone, and in this video, we, the Group 6, will be discussing our topic, which is the classical Christian tradition. We will be tackling about the overview of the key ethical issues and the perspective on the key issues that includes value, obligation, natural law, and virtue. And without further ado, allow us to start the discussion.
The classical Christian tradition. It is widely known that the first of our five philosophical perspectives is the one with the longest tradition in the Western world. So, the modern civilization is founded by Greek philosophy, Christian theology, Roman law, and the modern science. So, the Christian philosophy are included the value of Greek philosophy and the profound religious consciousness of Hebrew civilization. So, in the study of moral philosophy, we give our attention to the brilliant contributions of the Greeks. Socrates, as one of the originators of moral system, which declared in the Apology that the unexamined life is precisely the life not worth living. So the major keys terms such as the good, the just, and the virtues. Socrates' significant morals his confidence in the mind's ability to attain a degree of moral wisdom in the conduct of life. In his perspectives, man could and should bring his reason to bear in the conduct of the God life, that man should come up with standards that will guide him on his path of fulfillment. Plato or Plato, on his dialogues on the Republic, the Laws, and the Gorgias, also made solid contributions to the information of moral consciousness. However, the Greeks' masterpiece of moral inquiry is Nicomachean Ethics, that treats moral problems in terms of the capacities as well as the potentialities of man to do good. Within the work of Aristotle, happiness is the final end of human aspiration, and it can only be arrived by the use of reason. The influence of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle was so great, and even today we think that the Greeks as having been more concerned in the function of reason. Saint Thomas Aquinas believed that truth is one that whatever is true in faith and in science will never really conflict. He informed the Greek mind that Christian commitment and taught them the need of self-love. Since God loves all men, it is important to imitate Him by proper love of themselves. Also, Aquinas believed that the ultimate source of all obligation is the one eternal law, the divine plan for all creation that proceeds from God. But God chooses to make man such that by the use of his reasons come to recognize his obligations. Aquinas and Aristotle had confidence that man could discover some objective, universal, and necessary laws of morality. The natural law for all beings below man is necessarily followed, and so to speak is built into basic structure of the beings. For Aquinas, natural law consists that man elicits concerning conducts. Granted that man is to discover the pattern of his morality by the use of his reason. So they stated that related to intellect is the will, where one actively wants the good that has one come to know as the result of ability of the intellect. Christians agreed with the Greeks that a man cannot be satisfied as man unless his highest seeking, that of his intellect and will, is satisfied. The perspectives on the key issues. Value. The supreme value in the classical Christian tradition is both answered by the Greeks and the Christians. They were concerned with finding as a subject that faculty in man that is his highest of most valuable faculty, that the power of acting in some determined or specific way. They were both convinced that the faculty of greatest value of man in his intellect, the power of whereby a man can engage in reasoning, form ideas or concepts, and make rational judgments. We can this insight by referring to a statement of Josh Stuart Mill, who stated that it would be better to be a sad Socrates than a satisfied pig. In other words, man as subject simply could not be satisfied without taking into account that the perfection of his reason and his power of free choice. The Greeks' perspectives has even extended and enriched by the philosophy of Saint Thomas Aquinas, who was clearly impressed by the possibility that reason could achieve solid and respectable results in the field of morality. Aquinas lived at the height of the age of faith, and by his principles that truth is one of whatever is really true in faith and science will never really conflict. He was able to push his own intellectual pursuits to the very limit. In Plato, this immutability, this eternal character and permanence is seen in the eternal idea of justice, truth, goodness, and beauty. Though it would be incorrect of Plato as naively supposing that these ideas share a kind of spatiotemporal existence in another world. For Aristotle, man's fulfillment is gained by contemplation, but he did not specify any object that will itself be the perfect object of contemplation.
Hi, my name is Kenneth Renzo Jorfo, and I'm going to be discussing about perspectives on key issues on the classical Christian tradition. The first key issue to discuss is value or theory of value. So, what is value? Value is sometimes defined as the object of human desire and striving. The technical name for a theory of value is axiology. For the classical Greek, the life lived according to reason is the value, or the end in view, proper to human striving. The naturalists feel that the best possible fulfillment of the individual in society is attained through the technique of the behavioral science. The Christian finds value in the good of life leading to union, which is God. For the existentialist, value exists in the authenticity of an individual taking his life and his commitments seriously and with full responsibility. So, question: what is the supreme value in the classical Christian tradition? What do these philosophers see as the object towards which human beings strive and desire? So, the Greek and Christian philosophers answered the question in two ways. First is they were concerned with finding as a subject that faculty in man that is his highest or most valuable faculty, and finding the object that will most fulfill the faculty or power of reason. The greatest value in man, according to Greek and Christian philosophers, is his intellect, or the ability to reason and construct ideas or concepts, as well as making sensible decisions. Second is the object that will most fulfill the faculty or power of reason is seeking to establish that the most valuable power of man is his reason. Plato and Aristotle ask what there is in man that must be satisfied before he can be happy. They generally agree that man can properly satisfy only by some objects that is proper to his spiritual character. They saw man's special satisfaction to be necessarily a fulfillment of what is special in man. As a result, man's spiritual needs must be met before he may be pleased. The presence of intelligence, the power to understand the world and communicate that understanding in thoughts and sentences, was viewed by most philosophers in his school as an appetite or human disposition, that is, the primary source of human contentment, fulfillment, or happiness. John Stuart Mill. He stated that it would be better to be a sad Socrates than a satisfied pig. Man, as a subject, simply cannot be pleased without taking into account the perfection of his rational reaction and his ability to choose freely. Being a man without exercising responsibility or seeking the values of a decent and reasonable life is to live without using one's highest and most distinguishing power. The satisfied pig would not be aware of his happiness or be able to consciously dwell on and enjoy it. As Greeks and Christian views the world and man, they classified beings in a hierarchical manner. For them, the lowest beings in the world of sense experience consist of the minerals, or in their terms, the four primary elements, which is earth, fire, air, and water. Because of its abilities to reproduce its kind and expand from a general to a mature stage, as well as its ability to participate in nourishment, master the mineral components, and assimilate them into its own identity. A being with life is considered more perfect than one without, despite the fact that the plant is more perfect than the stone or the essential components. It lacks perfection of life held by the sentient animal, which has the higher ability to exist due to its held mobility, imagination, instinct, and organic experience. When the Greeks and Christians looked at man, they considered him as having the ability to use abstract reasoning, to master skill, and gain knowledge, resulting in the arts and science. This reasoning ability is superior than that of stone, plant, or animal in kind. It is the differentiating feature and important attribute. For Plato, though, it would be erroneous to convince of Plato as naively supposing that these eternal ideas share a form of spatial-temporal life in other universe. These eternal quality and per- permanence may be seen in the eternal conception of justice, truth, goodness, and beauty. Their domain is spiritual in nature. Man achieves his ultimate value when he is able to see what truth, justice, and beauty are in themselves by an act of direct intuition. Socrates describes the steps that lead to his revelation into beauty itself in the Symposium. For Aristotle, man's fulfillment is gained by contemplation, but Aristotle did not specify any object that will itself be the perfect object of contemplation.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jana Jane M. Ibao, and I'll be reporting the second ethical issue, which is obligation. First of all, allow me to discuss the definition of obligation. Obligation is the claim made upon the reason that some things are to be done and deserve praise, whereas others are to be avoided and deserve blame. So it is clearly related to the notions of responsibility and freedom, and it is quoted that we are responsible for the actions when we are ready to account for them or to ourselves or to others. So, the technical name for the part of ethics that deals with obligation is called deontology. So, Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher of the Enlightenment, stated that the experienced fact of duty or responsibility implies that we are free. And in his words, I ought, therefore I can. So, Kant was a deontologist that he placed the intuition of moral obligation at the very center of his ethics. Reason is also emphasized, and by the use of it, man sees himself obligated to do certain things, just like paying back your debts or to deal fairly with your friends, and it could also be a teacher is obligated to teach his or her students. So, obligation or the possession of duties is a moral demand imposed by man's reason in assessing his own life situation. Reason itself does not create this demand, but rather, by reason, man is able to recognize what is due to others and to himself. And by reason, people will and can recognize what is due to others and for themselves. Obligation, as described in the readings that follow, treats of rights and duties. A right is a moral power that imposes an obligation on another to respect it. Thus, every man who has basic needs for food and survival has a claim on the recognition by others at his needs. Correlative to the knowledge of obligation is the fact of freedom of choice. So one cannot be blamed for doing what he could not avoid under any circumstances. Likewise, one cannot claim praise for what has done automatically and without freedom of any kind. This condition of freedom in the phase of obligation is an essential ingredient in the classical and Christian tradition. It is not enough that one should act in a specific way, so one has to decide whether to follow his reason. So, a man understands the law, can formulate a law because of the power of reason that a man has. And though reason may command, choice of the reasonable deed does not necessarily follow. The classical tradition also emphasizes the spiritual and interior quality of free assent. Socrates affirmed in the Phaedo that his limbs, if left to themselves, would carry him fast from his prison, but because of his principles, he was able to make inner, spiritual, and free commitment to stay there. And in his description of obligation, Aquinas restated in a Christian context much of what was central to the tradition of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. For him, the ultimate source of all obligation is the eternal law, which is the divine plan for all creation that proceeds from God. But God chooses to make man such that can, by the use of his reason, come to recognize his obligations in life. And in the structure of the moral act, Aquinas saw another sign of the close way in which the human creature is able to participate in the plan of God. And in morality, a man participates in the eternal law of God by operating his moral life according to reason. So man is not passive recipient of ready-made laws, but he brings himself to know the law and to formulate it by the power of reason. So that would be all my report. Thank you for listening.
Good day everyone, my name is Kayla Mary, and I will report one of the perspective key issues of classical Christian tradition. So first of all, what is natural law? Natural law is a philosophical and scholarly tradition that traces its roots back thousands of years to the time of Plato and other Greek philosophers. And it is the view that all humans possess reason, such as all people, whatever their ethnicity, culture, or religion, have the ability to know the difference between good and evil or right and wrong. It also holds all humans possess free will and thus can choose to do good and avoid evil. People, for instance, inherently know that harming other people is wrong because when people choose good, they flourish precisely as a natural law. So, one of the philosophers, Aristotle, possessed the idea that happiness is a final end of human aspiration, and that it can be arrived at only the use of reason. So this is one of the natural law that the human can do. So next, Saint Thomas Aquinas lived in the height of age of faith, but his commitment never diminished his belief in man's power of reason. By his principles, that the truth is one, and whatever really true in faith and science will never conflict, and he was able to push his intellectual pursuit to the very limit. So, philosopher made significant contribution to the ideas and concepts that have encouraged the growth of free societies. So, a right moral power that imposes obligation on another to respect it. So, humans are meant to flourish to attain to a golden rule which almost all religions and cultures have in one way or another to treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. So, from St. Thomas Aquinas, is obligated to respect one's reason because not all people have it is a natural law of a human being to have faith or having a faith of God. You cannot force someone because they have free will to choose whether to have faith or to have belief. So for man's presence of freedom as a result, reason that makes the status natural law, not an external imposed necessity. Rather, man becomes aware of his nature and activities proper by him by autonomous act of reason. So for Aquinas, a natural law consists of judgment that man elects concerning conduct. Aquinas taught that the statement good is to be done and evil is avoided is a statement of law that no man of developed intelligence could deny. Natural law theme in this tradition is closely related to the notion of standards or norm of morality. Granted that man is to discover the pattern of his morality by use of reason. The question remains whether an AD model or standards exist against which man can rationally measure his action. So natural holds the universal moral standards that inherited in humankind through all the time, and these standards should be based on just a society. Because nature is a moral purposeless, so whatever purposes is given must be come from the human choices. Since human's action itself, the product of same causal forces, control the rest of the nature. The arguments run, we cannot be expected to break those forces in a dramatic way. So, a key insight of natural law is that if a man-made laws are to be morally binding, they must align with the people's reason tells them right and wrong. So, man's nature is said to be reliant and depending on God, is always perceiving man's being, and it is the fulfillment of man's effort. Man's action should show respect for God as creator and preserver of life, while first general principle of reverence of God can be discovered by comparing man to his fellow man. So, the second principle can be discovered by measuring man's nature in terms of the source and aim. Every man is thought to be capable of understanding that all humans have the same basic requirements, which is having a faith in God. But in natural law, we must respect other cultures, like their religions, like that, because you cannot force someone to having faith on that religion or on God, because we have free will to choose whether to have faith or not. Individuals should respect the same basic requirements that they have themselves in others. This norm is considered considered to be objective norm and very special way is seen to reflect the ultimate norm of morality and divine nature. And like I said earlier, natural holds the universal moral standards that are inherent in humankind through all time. And that's all. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I'm Father Audrey Shanaya and I will discuss virtue, one of the perspective key issues of classical Christian tradition. So first, what is virtue? Virtue in the Greek or Christian sense consists of qualities of excellence whereby man is rendered more as man. The qualities of excellence enable man to act with ease and order in a given area of human existence. It consists in conformity to the image of Christ in a new creature created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Virtue is described as the habitual and firm disposition to do good in Christianity, while classical philosophy defines virtue as the conformity of one's life and behavior to moral standards. It enables people to do good deeds and give their best effort. It is ingrained in our being and shapes how we act and react to the world around us. Now let's have the four cardinal virtues, from Latin cardo or hinge, are also referred to as the natural virtues because all lesser attitudes are based on them. Courage, justice, temperance, and prudence are the four virtues. The list is thought to have originated with Socrates and can be found in Plato and Aristotle. Late Roman and medieval Christian moralists like Ambrose, Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas used the list as a succinct summation of the ancient philosophers' teachings and the greatest standards to which they aimed. Now let's have the first virtue, courage. Courage helps us face danger and difficulty with inner peace. It allows us to carry out our duties even if it requires great sacrifice and sufferings. So, the Greek philosopher Aristotle believed that courage was a virtue, a marker of moral excellence. More specifically, it was the virtue that moderated our instincts toward recklessness on one hand and cowardice on the other. He believed that courageous person feared only things that are worthy of fear. Courage means knowing what fear and responding appropriately to that fear. For Aristotle, what mattered isn't just whether you face your fears, but why you face them and what it is that you fear. Next, we have justice. Justice helps us to live honestly by respecting the rights of others. A just person thinks only him or himself, their needs. Justice implied kindness and desire to respect laws of both Plato and Aristotle. It implied a balance of rights and responsibilities. In human relationships, justice was the goal of perfection. Promoting balance and harmony in thought and conduct was predominantly social in nature. Aristotle's justice and Plato's justice are complementary in that they both seek to discover principle of capability by which unity, harmony, and virtue and happiness can be produced in society. Despite this shared understanding, they are fundamentally different in many ways. Third, we have temperance, the power to control ourselves. The simplest definition of temperance is the virtue which moderates in us the inordinate desire to force sensible pleasure, keeping it within the limits assigned by reason and faith, or divine intimacy. Before the fall, all of the physical senses were in complete harmony and controlled by reason. Like all virtues, temperance must be learned through practice and patience. The only real way to become temperate is through prayer and self-denial. In other words, you have to tell yourself no now and then. And lastly, prudence. Prudence is the ability to make right choices in life. It tells us what we should do in order to be faithful to Jesus. So prudence is the intellectual virtue that guides the choice of means to achieve good ends. Also known as practical wisdom, it is the good habit of deliberation about which specific means are best with regard to the things that are either good or bad for a person. Someone who is prudent demonstrates good character through constantly choosing praiseworthy means to attain worthy ends. It helps individual devise effective plans for acting justly or cleverness, acting temperately or acting courageously. Prudence differs from mere cleverness, which can be used to select means to achieve bad ends as well as good ones. Prudence is always associated with moral virtue because it is the disposition or habit of choosing the best method for achieving good ends or goals and never bad ones. So before I wrap up my presentation, I want to share a little story with you. So I heard a story where when Jesus used these four virtues when he was sinless in his first mission. At the beginning of his mission, he has led through the desert to be tested with three main temptations. The first episode of John's temptations of the world are called pride of life, lust of eyes, and lust of body. Jesus rejects temptation with virtues of courage. Courage not to eat, risking his life to die of hunger. Prudence, caution not to make sign of might without reason, and temperance, self-control not to take glittering attractions of the kingdom of the world. So that's how Jesus Christ survived his mission. So that's all for my report, and thank you.